Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to the Conflict of Nick channel. I'm your host Nick, and today's video will be the second episode about tips and tricks that I use and recommend to others. The video will consist of tips, recommendations, and important information that any player can use to enhance their con skills. I recommend watching my previous videos of the tips and tricks series, as it will contain other important tips that will not be covered again in other tips and tricks videos. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Our first tip in today's video, using hit and run tactics with ranged units. Hit and run tactics are one of the most useful things you can know in Conflict of Nations. This tactic allows you to hit an enemy without getting hit in return. It is most commonly used for naval combat and artillery combat in the game. So how does hitting and running work? Let's use an example to better understand the concept. Let's say that you and your enemy both have a stack of ships with the exact same range, and the enemy has their ship stopped at a location in the ocean. How would you hit that person without taking any damage in return? Easy. Simply set your ships to attack the target and watch them closely. As soon as your ships get there and begin the attack, immediately pull the ships back after you get the notification that you hit the target. You will not get hit this way like you would if you kept bombarding the target and didn't pull back. Now, if the target decides to chase you, you can simply outpace them by rushing your ships if you deem it necessary. But remember, use the rush mechanic sparingly, as it could hurt your unit significantly if you use it for too long. One thing to note, be sure that when you're hitting and running, you do not have your artillery or ships set to the aggressive firing mode, because even when you order them to move back, they will not move back until the target is destroyed and will continue the bombardment, resulting in your units taking damage from the enemy. The second tip for today's video, keep your coastal cities defended. This may seem like a no-brainer, but I come across so many people who don't do it. This strategy will vary from country to country because the situations are all different. One country, which is an island, will want to be more defended with ships and less with land units, while a country with one to a few coastal cities will want land, naval, or both for defense. It all depends on the aspects of the country. One of the biggest factors is the size of the country. Israel, for example, is one of my favorite countries to defend because of its size. Since it's so small, you can easily defend it with artillery because the artillery can hit basically anything trying to disembark on your homeland cities from any of the cities. And a country which is very large, like the United States, however, will need a large navy to defend the vast amount of space where enemies can slip by and get to your coastlines. In the end, it's up to you when it comes to deciding how to defend your country, but never leave it undefended. A recommendation I have is to always have at least a 5 stack of infantry/armor in each of your coastal cities, if you have 1 to 3. If you have more than that, it's better to use ships instead of ground units because, due to the amount of ground units you would need to cover all that many, it would not be very effective. All in all, as my best recommendations for such a loose topic, I would say it's best to integrate many types of units into your defense, which would mean a combination of ships, melee units, and potentially artillery if your country is small enough to where it can be used to cover multiple cities at one time. The third tip for today's video, how to place defending ships and artillery. This is something I discovered more recently compared to most tips I know, so I'll describe it the best I can. When you have a ship outside of a port city to defend it, most players will put it at the nearest intersection of pathways on the water, or the junction, which is another word for it. This can be convenient because it will stop countries that you're currently at war with from docking in your country. But if a country who isn't at war with you wants to disembark at your city and take it, it'll pass your ship first because you're not at war with the enemy until the enemy starts to disembark. To combat this, something I've done which has proven effective is putting defending ships as close to the land as possible. So when the enemy starts to disembark and war is declared, my ships will be automatically close enough to directly engage them in melee combat, which will stop them from moving anywhere and from disembarking. This is a very important tip because many invasions will happen from your coastal cities because they are easier to access for the enemy. So the simple passive defense tactic will help you keep your city out of enemy hands. Lastly, for this tip, artillery placement is quite simple if you're utilizing it for coastal defense. Have it in the mountains if possible, because artillery units get a 25% damage boost in the mountains. Also, when When placing your artillery, place them outside of the city in a place where, if the enemy does successfully capture your city, you have to take a longer route to get to your artillery pieces. The fourth tip for today's video: use spies to destroy enemy airfields. This was something I more recently utilized a lot in my solo Afghanistan game against around 10 players at once during an all-out war. During this war, I destroyed many airfields and grounded large amounts of aircraft by putting sabotage spies in provinces with airfields. This strategy is extremely useful because many times your enemy will not see it coming, and you can destroy many airfields at one time. Now, you will want to put 2 to 3 spies in each airfield's province, 3 to be safe, and at the day turn, more than likely, you will have destroyed an enemy airfield. After you've done this, and if you still have spies in that province, remove them from that province and send them on their next mission. This tip is very simple but also super effective at hindering your enemy's performance during a war. Due to competent players making sure airfields are guarded by some aircraft or anti-aircraft, setting an aircraft can be pretty risky. Now, this is not me saying that you shouldn't attack airfields with aircraft, because that's a very effective strategy, and I do that a lot. However, spies can be a good option if your aircraft will be a bad choice for taking an enemy airfield out, because obviously anti-aircraft and fighter jets will knock out your aircraft and you don't want to take losses. Spies, you don't have to worry about taking losses. So utilize all of your resources, units, and spies to counter your enemy's airfields. The fifth and final tip for today's video: put anti-aircraft with your ground units. Obviously, there are many people out there, like me for instance, which might use a lightweight ground setup because we utilize heavy artillery, navy, or air force, and usually this means that our ground force usually just consists of National Guard. But many players out there are very fond of using heavy ground forces, and that's okay. This tip will be about how to make your ground stacks, ranged or melee, more volatile. A lot of players make formidable melee stacks with heavy armor and infantry, but someone could easily counter it with strike fighters or helicopters. So how do you counter that? Easy. You can use mobile anti-aircraft units or SAM launchers, or both. Personally, a setup I used to use a lot, in my opinion, which is still good, would be stacks of 6 maxed motorized infantry and about 4 mobile anti-aircraft units at least level 4 or above, because the range goes from 25 to 50 at level 4. These stacks were volatile because they had a ranged attack, number 1, from the mortars that the infantry got. They could damage helicopters and jets, and they were heavy enough to hold their own in melee combat if, for some reason, I engaged in melee combat or had to defend against an enemy stack. You don't have to just stick to this layout, however, because when using a popular stack of tanks and infantry, for example, you can have 1 to 2 infantry, 3 to 4 tanks, and 3 to 4 mobile anti-aircraft. And you can also throw a SAM launcher in there if you really want. However, I personally find mobile anti-aircraft to be good when stacked with melee units because they can also do damage to ground targets as well as helicopters, jets, and missiles. They're pretty much jack of all trades. A SAM would not hurt if you're concerned with jets specifically, however. Another valid strategy is to have a large artillery or melee stack with no anti-aircraft, followed by a 10 stack of purely anti-aircraft units. This can be mobile AA or SAM launchers or both. Personally, honestly, I would also recommend mobile anti-aircraft for this. This will hit really hard and deliver a punch if your main melee or artillery stack is hit. However, do not forget that my previous tip about AA placement in cities was talking about being able to have your AA defend and attack against enemy aircraft, and how that's much more effective than just attacking, because basically your damage is doubled instead of it just being attack, which would just be half of what you could be doing. This will conclude our second tips and tricks video. I hope these 5 pieces of valuable information prove helpful to you in all of your future games. And if you already were aware of them, that's great. I'm just hopefully able to help at least one person out there. There'll be many more of these tips and tricks videos to come, but for now, I'll end the video here so not make it too long. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed it in general, consider liking and subscribing, and feel free to leave a comment down below. I do try to read them all. And as a friendly reminder to check out my buddy War Always Changes. He'll be linked in the description. I wish you all a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Nick, over and out.